Hey guys, welcome to Spy Plays. Today we got a modern metagame analysis on how the decks are stacking up after the Modern Horizons 2 shakeup. We're going to get into how paper and online can vary heavily between shops and between the online meta. This should be a pretty good dive into how the meta is unfolding. Thank you guys for the support as always, and we love hearing your comments. Let us know down below what your favorite modern deck is right now, and let's get into the video. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Spy Plays. Today we're going to be doing a modern podcast. It's Jesse here, and then we got
My name's John.
you guys know John. Yeah, today we're pretty much going to be going over just a modern metagame overall and how we see, differences between paper and online play. So we're going to be looking at some leagues, challenges, and then talking about some decks that we have in paper and how we've been seeing like the meta in paper evolve as well versus like what we see online, because I think there's some pretty big differences, honestly. These are the big decks you're gonna be seeing, and we kind of wanted to do a little overview because we're gonna be talking about this more when we talk about like in paper play. But yeah, what would you say, is this is pretty indicative of the meta, I'd say?
Yeah, so of the online meta, this is kind of what it's looked like, right? And that's what
For sure.
MTG Goldfish is there to show. I
Right.
think it's I believe it's a little bit inaccurate, the MTG Goldfish data, because I think it only uses like a certain amount of data from leagues.
Oh, okay.
And only takes like a certain amount before it stops looking at like 5.0s, I believe. But for the most part, when you're looking at MTG Goldfish, it's one of the most accurate sites for finding your average meta percentage.
Yeah, I'm really curious. This is okay. This is really cool. I didn't know Death and Taxes was coming back. That is really interesting. I'm actually, let me see. I want to look at this real quick.
Yeah, but the meta has really felt like you're playing. If you're playing one of the best decks, you're playing a Cascade deck, you're playing a Luris deck, or you're playing a Darcy Ragavan deck, and a lot of them, or you're playing an Urza Saga deck. And when I say the Luris decks tend to play, the Ragavan Channeler, and then not all of them, but those tend to be like kind of a staple of the format right now. But,
yeah, Luris is a big staple.
You wind up with the Luris, Urza Saga, Cascade, and then the just like good red cards, right? And in general, the best decks in the format are choosing one of those dimensions,
or burn,
or multiple. A lot of them are choosing multiple. Like one of them that's coming up right now and doing very well is Jund, and the Jundlists are literally just taking all of the new broken cards and just jamming them in a deck. They're like Luris, it's not new anymore, right? But it's one of the most powerful cards, and they're one of the most prevalent cards in Modern, right?
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, so they're being like, Luris, check, let's do that. Darcy Ragavan, check, let's do that. And then, you know what, we'll just throw Urza Saga in there as well. And then use Ren and 6 to like get it back, and literally just playing all these good cards with not a ton of synergy, but they're just so strong that
it does
the deck
everything.
winds up being fine and good. Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's just one of those things where it's like, because Modern is so diverse, the best decks are the decks that either do everything, or the decks that are basically like anti-meta decks that are just like going really hard against the meta right now. And they survive in that little axis, but then when they face like a really weird deck, they'll just lose to it,
Yeah, which is something interesting because we haven't seen a lot of control lately, and it looks like the control decks have gone. People have really started to see what the metagame is about after Modern Horizons 2. There was some like shifting. Everything was getting things were going up and down. People started to realize that the kitchen decks aren't as good And now that the meta is kind of settled a little bit, these control decks like the blue-white control, the creativity decks, and even like these Luris control decks have wound up. I don't know if you can call them control decks, but like some of the Luris decks are like control decks.
Right.
But yeah, these control decks have kind of just started coming out of the woodworks and being able to play whatever it is that is good. One of the cards that I'm noticing that's coming out a lot is Chalice of the Void.
Chalice, that is huge.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest thing why Control's coming back heavily, is because when the meta got shifted really hard from Modern Horizons 2, Control is weak because it doesn't know what to do. You know, it's trying to figure out the meta. It's trying to like counter what's going on, and Control's the best when there's a small amount of decks, because it can just control those decks. That's what it needs to worry about. And now they're realizing
with Luris, it's like all these decks that are like quote so different, you know what I mean, actually really aren't.
They're just playing the good cards. they're
feels
playing
like yeah, there's like such a high percentage of cards that there are such a high percentage of decks that are just these Luris decks that are just playing like 50% of the same good cards. That it gets a lot easier to
the format is just right now it's 1 and 2 drops. It's so big, so if you can play Chalice, I think this is a meta defining card right now. Chalice is, if you can fit that into your deck, you are at such a high advantage of being able to control your opponent and just like take them off so many axes of like what they're playing on and what their plan is, because they're not expecting this. And if you're getting it on 1 and then 2, you've effectively locked a lot of decks out of the game.
Yeah, and they're only playing with what's on the board. Yeah,
and they literally like have to just pass a turn. I've put Chalices on. I have a mono red prison deck, but I've put Chalices on 2 and locked people out, and then put it on 1, and then they just sit there and they're like, okay, I pass, and then they pass, and
and a lot of the decks that aren't like these 1-drop. 2-drop or just basically 1-drop heavy centric decks are like these cascade decks, you know what I mean, where you can just drop Chalice on 0. So Chalice winds up being super strong right now,
100%.
And I think decks are really gonna have to adapt to it. And Jesse just played mono red prison like he was talking about in an event at our local game store and went 4-0 yesterday.
We'll talk about that.
Shit talking that.
We'll talk about that a little later. We'll go on because we're gonna talk about the paper meta and like the online meta. We're gonna get into the challenges right now after looking at these like decks, and just see like what's been going on, because I like to look at the challenges for sure, just to see really how the meta is shaping up, because these decks are all going against each other and they're trying. This is actual for ranking, you know. The other ones are just like 5-0, 5-0. It's like whatever, you can win 5-0 whenever, but these you have to beat people consistently. I think you have to go like 7-0 to actually get first in these challenges.
They're for larger stakes.
Or 6-1. Yeah, it's out of 7 games, and it's a lot. It's a lot larger stakes.
People are spending a lot of money to get in these events and are not just trying out random decks. So you're a lot more. The good decks are usually a lot more concentrated.
For sure.
And occasionally you see like some off meta decks, like a couple, but it's much more concentrated in the higher end of
Well, we're gonna talk about some decks in here. A deck that is definitely defining the meta and it's very cool is 5-color elementals. What are your thoughts on this 5-color elemental deck?
I think the 5-color elementals deck has done like a really good job at being pretty good against Hammer Time.
For sure.
And some other decks. Being able to play a deck that can play all these pitch elementals like Fury and Solitude, and play this like free interaction while being able to play a card like Risen Reef that basically undoes the card disadvantage that comes with them. Winds up being really powerful. I think the deck is starting to peel off a little bit now, and I think it's gonna continue to,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, it is a little bit slow at trying to do what it's trying to do.
Right.
But it interacts pretty fast, and yeah, it's quick to be able to interact, and it has like all the tools, and it has like a lot of end game capability.
100%. Yeah, I think I'll talk a little bit about it. The deck, yeah, like you said, it is slow, but once you get that Risen Reef down, you are off to the races with this deck. You get so much value from, you're literally casting free spells and drawing every turn. Not only is drawing, you're looking at the top card. And so it's the land, you just put it onto the battlefield tab. That's like insane. You're getting free ramp or you're getting card draw. You're getting one or the other. It's a win-win either way. And on top of that, you're able to play that ephemerate combo, and instead of exiling something and then using just the elemental for the effect, you're actually going to be getting the effect twice, and you're going to be having the elemental stick for 1 mana. So
Yeah.
this is a huge combo, and on top of that, they can play Teferi to kind of like slow their opponents down there and like stop interaction. And they're only playing creatures, so they're getting around a lot of interaction anyways, like casting Fury, Endurance. It's hard for Force of what is it? Force of, okay, what am I missing?
Force of Negation?
Negation, yeah, sorry. Force of Negation to they're right here, yeah, to get any of these cards. You can't counter any of this. I can counter this, but you can only counter like a couple spells in the deck, very, very many, and none of them you really want to counter except maybe Teferi. So it's like you're getting so much value, and you're kind of hitting on a different axis that a lot of decks don't have access to. And playing Endurance is really good right now, taking graveyard decks out. It's got a tool. It's like, it kind of reminds me of Humans, you know. It has a toolbox where it can just kind of pull in things like Charmaw and
Yeah.
it's like random things where it can just kind of, all it needs, the basis of the deck is elementals. It's not like it's a certain color, it's a certain what is it? It can always pull from anything that's an elemental that's been printed, and it got literally everything it needed from Modern Horizons 2.
Yeah, I think the deck is I think it's strong and it's good. However, I think these more aggressive decks that care a little bit less about the Fury and Solitude
Right.
being cast, i.e. like assuming they can't get Omnath out really quickly,
Right, that's
with
another
their Utopia
big
Sprawls
thing.
and whatnot. Decks like Burn and some of these just like, I don't know, some of these more aggressive decks, as well as like Blue-Red Murktide,
Yeah.
they can wind up having pretty quick draws that is difficult for the Elementals deck to deal with.
For sure.
And Elementals, it has so much like late game inevitability, but I think people are starting to play around the Risen Reef a little bit better.
Definitely.
And I think
yeah.
the key to that deck being able to like push into the late game is pretty much all centered around Risen Reef. So
Yeah, that's true.
It's, I don't know, it's an interesting deck that I think is falling off a little bit, but it looks like it's still a good deck, and it's
still holding.
putting up results. Yeah,
It's putting up results for sure. I think it's a decent deck, but it's not. Yeah, it obviously got first, but it's not like the end all be all. It's the meta's so diverse that a lot of actually decks come down to like sideboarding and being able to like do that. I want to actually take a quick look at the second place list, because this is not close to my list, but I think something that's coming back in the meta, and this deck signifies this, is the decks that are locking other decks out of their game plans and kind of just having so much like this is what I call an anti-meta deck. Like to me, this looks like an anti-meta deck. It's got 4 chalices. It has Blood Moon sides. You could play Blood Moons main, but mainly because there's a lot of Murktide and stuff, so it doesn't really hurt them. This is a card that's meta defining, that's going to take it out. Fury is going to take out their little 1/1s and all that, and then it's able to
playing so many.
Right, it's able to quickly get out Eldrazi and just kind of like
just
pressure.
outclass your opponent's creatures, pretty much.
Right. It's outclassing them, and it's going just a tiny bit. It's not like burn. It's not like that quick, but it's stopping their game plan with the chalices, and then it's just blowing up all the value that they have on the floor. That's all this low mana value, and it's just beating them and taking their cards. It's hitting them on so many different axes, and I think it's so cool. That's how I feel about the deck.
It seems to be an actual real deck right now.
For sure.
Chalice again has been so strong. I think that's another thing that Elementals is lucky about, though, that it's it's one of those decks that does dodge Chalice.
For sure.
And not only that, but it actually does well against these like prison decks, because it has like I don't know, prismatic ending and stuff, and Teferi, which are good ways to deal with these permanents.
Right.
But this deck is a really interesting deck that is showing
results. It's gotten a couple, like, if you look,
results.
Modern League got, well, that's a league, but this is the challenge, second place. Another challenge, first place, actually. Let's see if we can go down. Okay, and then a couple 5-0s, whatever. The challenge is what we look at, but
it's really demonstrating the power of Chalice and how, like, if you land a Chalice,
early, it's
oftentimes,
yeah.
And even if you can't land it early and you land it like a little bit in the mid game, your creatures, like, you wind up having your creatures compete with your opponent's creatures, and these creatures that the Eldrazi deck is playing just go a little bit above. They just go above and outclass everything that gets left over. You know what I mean? And that has appeared to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, the only one that's gonna get hit is Ragavan, but it's Ragavan. Like, you play this turn one and you're just getting value from it, and then the rest of the deck, it's like, it doesn't really mind. It'd rather have Chalice on one and draw like a Ragavan, because it's already got like all this stuff out to pressure them. So you're chilling on that front.
Help accelerate into these 3-drops and 4-drops, right?
Oh yeah, with that Eldrazi Temple, you're getting this. If you get Eldrazi Temple, something else, like any land, you can get into like a Matter Reshaper and then go into your like Thought-Knot Seer really quickly, and then a Reality Smasher. And if you get these out, a lot of these decks, they're running removal for things that are like lower CMC or like 3 and under. Lightning Bolt's gonna be taking stuff out. I mean, you can have other stuff like Fatal Push and stuff like that, but that's not gonna hit Reality Smasher or Fury, and they're gassing these things out. And then they're also putting Chalice down. So I think this is a super cool deck that is like showing how the meta is. People are building anti-meta decks to kind of combat stuff, and
I think and these it's been kind of cool.
It's interesting. Yeah, I like it.
Do you want to take a look at the metagame summary as well? I think that's pretty interesting.
Metagame summary? Where's that? Sorry.
On the right.
Oh yeah. Let's look into that. Yeah. So these are the decks that they have in general. And then
being most played, right?
Yeah, we'll get into we'll get into how this relates to paper after too. So we got Burn, Hammer Time, Elementals, Blue-White Control, Living End, Is It Tempo, Footfalls, the Eldrazi Red, Sacrifice, Titan. This is the interesting one, Gift Storm. That's cool. I'm surprised that that's still like up there.
Want to play that?
Yeah, Jund. I'm surprised Jund is so low in this challenge. Actually, that is pretty surprising. It's under Gift Storm, which is these are just
all the one-ofs. Yeah,
that's true. These are all one-ofs.
But I think what is interesting here is just looking at the like the top 4, right? You see a lot of Burn. Burn it was kind of off the radar for a while because these kitchen decks, as they call them, were so good against Burn. Being able to make all these foods was just all these food tokens with your Underworld Cookbook and whatnot was just like so powerful. But those decks have really fallen off as they have had a hard time competing with the speed of the format, with the amount of pressure that's put into play. But with that, Burn has come back, and there's a lot of like I don't know. Burn has just been doing really well at getting under these decks that are quote aggressive, but are playing like a ton of removal, and the burn deck's able to like play its creature and get like a swing off and be good for the turn, and then just play these cheap cards that are not too easy to interact with. And
Right.
even though I don't think so, I guess a burn deck top aided. The burn decks, I don't think they have been like the best thing in the world,
Yeah,
but they've have like a pretty even matchup. They do pretty well against most matchups.
definitely. And this is burn never dies. Like
Yeah.
it'll always be. It's like Tron. Like the deck
Yeah.
is just so many people play this deck, and people have been playing this for years, and it's just such an easy deck to get into the format and to like start playing. But it has a decently high ceiling for the deck. I think the more you play
Low
it,
floor and a decent ceiling.
decent ceiling.
I don't
not
think
like
it's
super
a super
high.
high ceiling, yeah.
Right,
But
but
it's more than most people would say. They're like,
right, yeah,
just throw it at
yeah.
your opponent. But
You need to know a little bit of knowledge, and you need to know when to like kind of like stagger things, and that's what's gonna get these burn decks into the
that
top
extra,
8 and stuff like that.
few points
It's going to be the difference because there's a burn list there's 2 burn lists that went 29th and 30th,
yeah,
and then there's one that went 8th.
A lot of burn matchups come right down to that last point of damage. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So eking out every single little advantage you can with a deck like that is important.
Yeah.
Very important.
Let's talk about the most played cards. That's another interesting.
That's a good one too. I
Yeah.
also want to. Yeah. Okay, that's fine actually.
Yeah. We'll talk about these cards. So we got Lightning Bolt. Obviously, that is going to be 37 copies.
Jeez.
I mean, Lightning Bolt's a staple of Modern. Like it is.
Yeah.
If there's one card to define Modern for like the longest time, it's probably Lightning Bolt, I would think. And Fury though, that is surprising.
It is very surprising.
Look at the top. Okay, people were really low on Fury first of all, but like look at the
For
top.
a while, yeah.
Look at the top 4. 3 of them are Modern Horizons cards, and 3 of them are Elementals.
Yeah, I think that goes to is in part because of so many people playing the Elementals deck,
Right.
but also these Cascade decks
Yeah.
have really enjoyed playing these Elementals. Fury, I think, is a one that the Crashing Footfalls decks tend to play, and that's why it's up there. Endurance, a lot of decks have been playing that in their sideboard, and then Solitude. A lot of these control decks that aren't playing the 1-drops because they want to opt to play their Chalice of the Void instead are choosing to play these Solitudes in either like 1 or 2 copies. Some play more, but I think usually it's it looks like people are playing like 4 now. I can see why too. Yeah. Really helping you shore up that early game in these control decks that just want to drop a Chalice early if they can.
Exactly. And Teferi is pretty good as well. Prismatic Ending is a huge card that came out too.
Yeah.
People slept on that one, I think, a little bit as well. Not sure if it was like super slept on, but like I think people are realizing I feel like it's gotten better and better and better over time.
I don't know if people like slept on it, but it's just.
I feel like it's gotten. Sorry, that was the wrong thing. Not slept on, but like people didn't realize how good it was. Like it is incredible. Like more lists are just running more and more of it, and like even Mill, that's what I was talking about earlier, is running white because of this card alone, because Prismatic Ending is able to fix or get rid of the permanents that you need to, like chalices, because they're like holding you up, and when you're playing black you can't do that very effectively. You only have bounces, but when you're playing black and blue you can't do stuff like that. So Ending is a huge card, especially if you're playing a deck that can get it up to the 3, the 4. It'll get a lot of cards. I'm surprised Rest in Peace. That's a big sideboard card right now, I'm guessing, for sure, for those graveyard decks.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of decks that care at least like a fair amount about their graveyard.
Right.
I think people were in this league. It looks like they were, I don't know. Rest in Peace is a really good Excuse me, I got a cough. Rest in Peace is a really good card against like a lot of these what's it called? Dragon's Rage Channeler decks.
That is true,
These
yeah.
Darcy decks really want to hit Delirium, and then the Is It Tempo deck really also wants to delve with their Murktide Regent.
Oh, for sure.
People are starting to play Tarmogoyf more because they realize it's really good with Dragon Rage Channeler, and when your opponents are also playing Dragon's Rage Channeler,
right?
XYZ,
yeah.
Get where it's going, right? So graveyards are so important right now.
They are definitely.
There's like a few combo decks that want to be using their graveyard, so I'm not surprised to see it this much.
That's
definitely a card that if you're playing white, you want to be playing that in your sideboard.
Yeah, and then we got
provided it doesn't destroy your own deck, right?
Right, exactly. You don't want to side in. Yeah, I mean, you're never gonna put something that's gonna mess up your own deck.
Yeah.
So we got Force and Negation as well as a really high, which I think just goes back to the fact that Control was the fourth most played deck, and then so was Elementals plays it as well.
Yeah, Control and Elementals.
Yeah.
Definitely.
They're going to be putting those in. If not main, probably most likely sideboard. I think a lot of decks can play it, actually.
Yeah. The card that I think is very interesting here is Engineered Explosives.
Definitely.
You see, is in 38% of decks.
That is pretty cool.
Engineered Explosives has always been like a techie card, but and like maybe you put like a couple in your sideboard, but for the, I don't know if I don't know if I can say for the first time, but I'm gonna say for real, the first time people are really even thinking about playing one or two copies of Engineer Explosives in the main board of some of their decks, just because one drops are so prevalent
and they're so low to the ground. Yeah, the meta is so low to the ground. It's what I call right now is like a Lurrus meta. Doesn't mean that every deck needs Lurrus, but it's just like there's so many decks running around with, or they're thinking about Lurrus or putting it in. It's just like a lot of decks, they don't. There's no There's no downside for Lurrus, so they're just plain Lurrus, and we call it Lurrus decks because they're already just so low to the ground. Like these Hammer Time lists, these aggro lists, like the burn lists, and there's like, I mean, Murktide. If Murktide wasn't there, it'd basically be a Lurrus deck.
Yeah,
it's
and even
like
people sometimes are like, we're really thinking about it hard for a while. I think the only reason that I think because they have to splash a third color, it makes it difficult.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, I have to play like I have to play some watery graves in my deck, and then I'm playing 3 colors, so and that's kind of why the.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I another thing for Engineered Explosives is it does also get around those things that kind of mess up certain decks, like the Chalices. It'll get rid of Chalice for 2 mana because you just play it on 0 and then you just blow it up for 2. So you're effectively paying 2 mana to get rid of a piece that was going to lock you out of the game. So a lot of decks that are going to get messed up by Chalice will side in Engineered Explosives just to be safe, because you want in Modern to play like, personally, your sideboard should be against your worst matchups, just so you can like survive those and make those like winnable, versus like trying to side in things against you're already just gonna hard win against. There's no reason you just play main deck against decks that you're just gonna destroy.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it. And so Engineer Explosives is just a kind of catch all to like these random effects that'll just take you out of the game, like Chalice, and then there's what's some other one? Then you can just blow up all the little like 1-drops, or you're playing against Hammer Time, you still put it on 0 and you blow up like half their board.
Yeah, 1 or 0 and just
goodbye.
Destroy everything.
Goodbye Memnite and Ornithopter.
Super strong versus.
Yeah, and those are the big decks. Surprisingly, not in this tournament though, which is funny. There's not a single Hammer Time deck, is there? Oh no, there is. There's
Hammer
some
Time
Hammer
was one of the most played decks.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of them, I guess, in the metagame summary. They didn't have them.
Really?
I'm dumb. Never mind. I'm not even looking at it. Yeah, it's right here. It's the second most played. Of course. Okay, there you go. There's what the Engineered Explosives can do.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Hammer Time's huge. So this does really well against that, and if you're expecting to play into it, it's what you should be playing. And then now we'll just kind of talk about. I'm gonna go on to just the overall like what we see online versus what we're seeing in paper, and how like me and John have been playing Modern for maybe 2 to 3 months now in paper consistently.
Playing a lot.
And we're playing pretty often. Yeah. Like for 1 week, we were playing like 3-4 times a week.
Yeah.
And so
we're playing events 3
events, yeah.
Weeks,
so we were
and
just
still sometimes like going home, and I don't know if you were, but then still like going home and playing online, or
I would
like,
play online a little bit,
or or like watching videos about
Modern
for
sure
as I'm falling asleep and stuff.
And, 100%, yeah,
right, every night.
Definitely. And that's when we were kind of like we've been building decks. John actually just built Hammer Time,
yes.
And then he's been playing. What's funny is he's been playing my Heliod and Company deck, and I just built a mill deck, and so he's playing that deck, and it has been surprisingly, it's not like a meta deck, and this is when I'll go into say that like FNMs, the meta is so it's even more diverse than you're seeing online right now. Like there is weird decks that you will come across, and if you do not have like an access to win against them or to stop them, you're gonna get screwed.
Yeah.
And so with Heliod, I mean, you can talk about Heliod. How's it been for you with the events?
I think people have just like probably been not giving it enough love online for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's just annoying to click through an infinite life combo.
For sure.
Like, when do you stop? You know what I mean? When you're when you're playing
so
against
annoying.
your opponent, it's like if you're doing an infinite damage, you just go until your opponent's dead, right? But if you're doing like infinite life, you just keep going. You know what I mean? What do you go to 100, 200? How much time are you willing to waste, right? And so having to deal with that gets annoying, and people have been playing the deck for a while in the meta right before Modern Horizons 2. Heliod Company was the best deck. It got just about nothing other than like a couple sideboard cards from Modern Horizons 2. But
I got Endurance, Sanctifier,
sideboard cards.
Sideboard cards, and then let's see. Some people are playing Solitude, not really. Sanctifier main sometimes. That's about it. Yeah, didn't really get much. I think that's why people are low on it. It's because everyone's so like hot with these new cards, and they're like, Modern Horizon, I love this.
Yeah,
set's so good. Like it's warping the format. And then Heliod was like, hey guys, I'm still here.
Yeah. And so I've been playing it in paper, and the deck theoretically is pretty like not great to Ragavan decks, right? Because Ragavan usually you only play like 4 of a 1-drop, and you play no 1-drop removal spells in the deck. So if you're on the draw and they play a Ragavan, the Ragavan's pretty much just going to hit you. But what I've found is it winds up not being that bad, because most of the time they're not really hitting anything that matters. And as long as they aren't playing, or they're usually not hitting a card they want to cast. Most of these Ragavan decks, some of them are playing white, but or green, but they're usually almost never. I don't think any of them are ever playing both. And usually they just do not want to cast your spells.
No, I don't think Ragavan wants to
Ragavan winds up being like, Ragavan winds up being a mana dork that deals 2, which is very strong, but it's beatable, it's not
100%.
like how it is in the Ragavan mirrors, where it's like, okay, if the first opponent sticks a Ragavan, and then the second opponent plays their Darcy on their turn 1, and then the Ragavan player untaps, kills the Darcy with a bolt, swings him with the Ragavan, hits another Darcy off the top of the opponent's deck and plays that. Like, that's just backbreaking. Like, you've lost the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you've lost the game on your turn 1, essentially.
Yeah.
But you don't wind up having that kind of thing. And I've just found that there are so many decks right now that just cannot beat you if you have infinite life. And if you have infinite life and, more cards in your deck than your opponent,
you win.
most of the decks other than mill.
Yeah.
And blue-white control
Right.
tend to just kind of have nothing.
Wait, what does
And
blue-white control play that wins?
they just play Teferi and Jace. So Jace will exile your library.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, and Teferi will exile your permanents and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they ult Jace and kill you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Tron will ult Karn.
Old Karn, right? Start a new game.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there's some decks that'll get around it, but there is a lot of decks, especially in like the metagame that I noticed, like that we're playing in stores, where there is a lot of burn decks and like goblin decks and like quick decks.
There's a fair amount of Jund and
right.
Is it Tempo?
Is it Tempo's a huge one? Yes.
Yeah, there's
surprisingly not a lot of hammer time.
Yeah.
Not a lot of hammer time that I see. I see maybe 2, and we play at a store that hosts modern a lot. Like we play at different stores, but even the stores that we've gone to that are like a little bit farther away, and they'll have a little bit different metagames, but like the one that we go to the most is like a very, very well known, like if you want to play modern at a good high level, you play there. They host the most 1Ks. They host like the big events. So they're the modern store. Yeah, Collector Legion, we'll shout them out. They're a really great store. I would definitely check them out. And they do a lot of really cool events, and I don't see a lot of hammer time, which is really weird.
Yeah. It seems like, I don't know, a lot of these paper players love their old Jund decks and their Tempo decks, and a lot of people seem to invest in them because they think that's what's going to be good, and that's what's going to be good for a long time. And yeah, I've had a lot of success with the deck. I think right now my record is 29-6 with the deck.
John's getting some good money from these decks.
And it's really just been about trying to find the right time to against these, I don't know, these blue decks. It's like trying to stick your Heliod at the right time, and then against like these decks with the tons of removal, it's about really just timing everything correctly and seeing, okay, when can I play my spike feeder, when can I do this, what am I doing, and mulling correctly. And it seems to, a lot of the times you just have it, and if you're playing tight and making inferences about what your opponent has by the kind of plays that they're making, you can win a lot of games. And I think the deck is very strong, and it's strong in paper.
Definitely.
I think
it's a lot stronger in paper than it is online. Like if you guys look up online, we'll go through. This is it's like right above Infect in the meta. It's the same as Infect and Gift Storm, but I will say that Heliod and Company is way better than both of those decks right now. It is gonna do a lot better than those. So that's what I'm saying. Like online, sometimes you look at the meta and you'll be like, oh, I want to build the meta deck, and or you want to tech against oh dude, there's gonna be so much hammer time in paper. No, sometimes there isn't. You just got to go to your store and figure out. I will say, I think in every store there's gonna be some Jund. Jund is a deck that I've seen at every single thing that I've played.
Play against your Jund players.
There's been one time where I think I didn't see Jund,
and
here's
that was a note. Make your decks that farm the Jund players.
Make some Jund farming decks. No, there are a lot of Jund players for sure, and there's a lot of. I have seen a lot of Is It Tempo, because I think a lot of people have pieces to these decks in general. Like the Lightning Bolts, Thought Scour, Spell Pierce, the Counter Spell. People already have a lot of this, and then the land base is generic Is It good land base, and a lot of people build Is It decks in general. They're just a fun tempo-y deck. Then the only thing they really have to buy a lot of is the Ragavan, the Darcy, and the Murktide.
Spend a lot on.
Right.
But
so
those expensive cards can also, I think people are realizing, hey, if this version of the deck isn't good, then I can like turn it into another Darcy Ragavan deck,
Right.
which I've seen people do. Like I remember I went last week and some guy who was playing Is It Tempo deck the week before decided to turn it into a Luris Grixis Death Shadow deck. And the decks play like a ton
of the same
cards, and like the cards that are a little bit different are like lands, which a lot of people have just kind of like built their mana bases and they just like keep it in their collection, right? A lot of like, you know, longtime Modern players, and then yeah, they're just people are like switching between the different flavors of these Darcy Ragavan decks.
Right. Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm gonna, because while he was playing my Heliod deck, I was playing Mill a lot, and so I was getting a nice like good meta game of like how Mill favors in paper for sure. So we do have. Personally, I think the metagame that I was facing against, because there isn't a lot of hammer time, which is one of Mill's like best matchups because of Tasha's Hideous Laughter. I think in paper, at least for where we live, Mill it's good. It's still a really good deck. It's up there for sure, but it is gonna have a lot harder of a time against these other decks that aren't so low to the ground with like the Luris decks or like the besting or like the combo decks, because I noticed a lot of my games were very kind of hit or miss. If I was playing like a combo deck, like I played Living End, immediate 2-0. Like that was the easiest game I've ever played. I'm not even joking. I knew he had counters and stuff like that, so I played around it. So I mean, if I played it really dumb, I could have just like, if I just like every turn just like threw everything I could at him, he would be able to counter some of the stuff and get rid of things. But I played slightly smart and was able to just straight up wipe the floor like with that deck. So it's like, and Living End is a top tier deck as well. And so like the Indomitable Creativity, I played it online and it also does pretty well against that deck. But its hard matchups are Tempo. Is It Tempo? Burn is a really hard matchup. Elementals it's pretty close. I'd say it's closer. Affinity is a hard matchup. Any of these aggro matchups are going to be generally pretty hard for the deck, even though it does have a lot of removal, because it's kind of like, it's not pressuring them, so they don't need a trade. They're just building their board. The problem is when you build a board against this deck, it does have a hard time getting rid of that. And so that's why actually you've seen Mill move over to white, so it can get rid of more hate pieces, some like chalices and stuff, but also like to just exile things so that it can't be recurred by Luris. Which is like really, that is something that comes up. And so it's been kind of going around. I really like Remand in this deck too, because like a lot of the times with Mill, you're usually one turn off because like they have 10 cards in library. So just putting them a turn back and then getting to draw a card, that is amazing.
Find your next Mill spell.
Find your next Mill spell, and that's what you're like, trying to be doing. Exactly. You're trying to find that next Mill spell, and the Remand is able to stop them from dropping like a 3-drop and then putting it back. And say they like exile something with like they're casting Fury to get rid of your crabs or something, or they're casting Endurance and they have to exile a card, you can remand that back to their hand, and then they're down the card, you're up a card, and they still have the thing in the card, and if they want to play it again, they got to exile another card, you know? Even if they have the card, they have to have something that's green or red or whatever color. So it's I think the blue-white version right now is better situated in the meta currently, because you're able to play like Path to Exile, Prismatic Ending, you got the Soul Guides, Spell Pierce. I guess people go Ashiok, which I've actually been thinking of as well. It's pretty cool. I just think it does do the Mill plan. People are actually on Esper as well. I know there's people in like the Mill Discord that love Esper, and I think Esper is pretty decent as well. My problem with Esper is it is a little bit weaker to like these Blood Moon effects that a lot of decks are playing in their sideboard, so they can side that in and kind of mess with the mana base. And because it is, if you're looking at this mana, a lot of it is 2 blue, 2 blue, 2 blue. Yeah. So you do need to, as long as you can get those islands out, you should be good. But if they can get it out early, it gets kind of difficult. I played Prison against my friend playing my Mill deck, and it was pretty bad for him, even though he was trying to get those islands out. So it is pretty interesting. This deck overall for me hasn't been doing too good in paper. I'm like probably like 12. Oh, like in the games overall, I guess. Like if you not by rounds, but just by like pure games, probably around like 12 wins and maybe like 20 losses, I would say, somewhere around there. So I'm definitely like in the negative. Maybe like 12, 16. I might be going a little too high with 20, but that's what it feels for me. So it's definitely a deck that is harder to play, though, I will say, and it's been fun though. I've been enjoying it. A lot of what I see in paper, though, the problem is people do play a lot of burn. So like how burn is online, there is a lot of burn in paper. There's a lot of Jun. There's where we play is a lot of tempo. So that is a hard deck for the matchup. So that's kind of what I've been seeing. Tron is pretty big too, actually. We've been leaving out Tron. We haven't talked about it. Tron is on the upswing, I think. Tron is coming back. It
has been on the upswing. I think it's probably gonna go back down a little bit.
Back down.
I think it's gonna find like a happy medium. Where it's like, it's not one of the like most played decks, and it's not like complete fringe, but it's just kind of gonna be like there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, people love Tron too.
Like Tron usually is.
Yeah, people love this deck. It's always there. Yeah. Tron is always there, but it is.
There's never been like a ton of it, but it's just always there.
Yeah, and it gets
always been there.
The thing is, when the meta gets so low to the ground, Tron is like the literal opposite of that. It's like, dude, like what is it? When I cast Tasha's, I hit like Ulamog and like Karn and then a Worm Coil, and then I'm done. Yeah. And I mill 3 cards. It's like, I mean, it's funny though, because mill is actually a good matchup for this deck. But like the things it's playing is so big. Like it plays really, really big spells that aren't going to be affected by any of the hate that is out right now. Like, what is Lightning Bolt going to do against like a Worm Coil engine?
Yeah, it's a deck that, as it's being piloted in like your match 1, it's dodging most of the like meta cards, right?
For sure.
Your opponent's removal spells, Tron is just like, okay, next.
Right.
Your opponent's like
they're like, I have 4 fatal pushes. I have to take them out immediately.
Yeah. Just there's a lot of like your opponent's Chalices of the Void. A lot of the cards. Yeah. A lot of the cards that your opponents are playing are not targeting Tron. That being said, Tron is still just like, as funny as it is to say, it feels like a little slow.
Oh, it definitely is. It's definitely slow, but it's not getting hit at all. And once you get Tron out, you're off to the race. It's kind of like elementals in that aspect. You're just off to the races. When you get your engine online, you're just going, and that's how these decks are putting up good results. I'd say overall the meta is really nice in paper and online. The meta is very, very, like if you look at this, there's so many decks. We didn't even talk about so many of these decks like Amulet, Yawgmoth's Will. So if you're getting into modern, this is a great time to get into modern. I'd say this is one of the better times that I've seen to get into modern.
It's been a lot of fun,
and that's why I've gotten into modern, because it is really fun. I'm gonna go over a pet deck of mine. Did you want to do a pet deck as well for you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go just quickly at the end. I wanted to shout out to mono red deck. So this is another thing we'll go on, like anti-meta deck.
Prison, baby.
Red Prison. I wanted to build this deck for so long. This is the first deck I was gonna build, but Monkey got banned. Simian Spirit Guide, not the new Monkey, the trash Monkey. And this deck is, I just 4-0'd with it. We mentioned it earlier at our LGS, and it is very cool because it is stopping so many people on weird different axes, and I think it's really underrated online meta because it's also like Heliod in the fact that like no one wants to lock someone out and have it to like, you know, just keep going back and forth. Like it's annoying to do that on your computer, to constantly be pressing 1, you know, going through your main phases, or just like pressing 6 and having to go through and like waiting to see what you get and having to cast your, it's just, this deck feels a lot better to play in paper than it does online, and I think that is the reason that it's a lot lower online. just like that. But also, it's such an anti-meta deck that it felt so good when I was playing against very different decks. I was playing against Murktide, what else did I play against? Burn and Humans. And I think that was it. Oh, we'll have to do more testing with this deck, but it feels pretty nice, I'd say. It feels very nice to have this deck coming back, and it goes to show that the meta is so diverse, and you can just build almost any pet deck you want right now. That's like, as long as it's got the right stuff in there, you can really. This is right now. It's a brewer's meta, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You can brew a lot in this meta and get really cool results with it. And this is one of the decks that I just recently brewed up, and it's put up results for me now. And we'll do some more testing, but I think it's got some great promise. Honestly, it's pretty interesting.
It's looked interesting.
John doesn't like it. He thinks it's bad.
Well,
he told me my deck was bad, and then I 4-0'd, and I said, "Wow, yeah, this deck must be pretty bad." This deck just got me $60, and
yeah.
To be fair, he did 4-0 as well. he 4-0'd with the Heliod deck, which is the deck that is not on any of these. It's really low on the tier list, so there's room to do weird stuff. Like, people play goblins and stuff. So Ad Nauseam, actually, I think, is another sleeper deck. That is a deck that is very sleeper as well. That I think could be coming back a little bit because people aren't really going against it at all. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it we have for the modern metagame for our talk today. Do you have any last thoughts to go on, or?
I don't know.
Just good.
Yeah, get to brewing. Play I don't know. Take a look at the interaction of the format and be like, hey, how can I play against this and not get my dick stomped by, and then make something cool, because there's a lot of room.
There's a lot of cool
stuff.
You know what it does? It reminds me of CDH, the format that we usually play, and there's just so much brewing going on right now, and I think it's a good time to play Magic. It's fun.
It is a good time
coming
to play
back.
Magic.
If you can play with like I know the pandemic is still going on and stuff, but if you're able to get into your store safely and have a good time and play paper Magic, it feels great, especially coming back from not being able to play for a year.
Paper Magic, yeah.
Paper feels so good. It is. We were looking at the online stuff, but I don't think anything will ever beat playing paper Magic.
No.
Yeah. I think we'll wind it off on that. Well, I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys for watching the video, and if you watch to the end, thank you. We appreciate all the support and all this stuff. And is there anything you want to say to end it off?
Like, subscribe, and hit the bell button, bro.
Yeah, hit that bell. All right, guys.
Help the homies grind.
Help the homies grind. All right. We'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.